Hello and welcome to Movies We Dig, the podcast about film, antiquity, and everything in between. I'm Elijah Fleming.
And I'm Christy Vogler.
And today we'll be digging into our archives to revisit the 2014 film Hercules, an American action film directed by Brett Ratner and adapted to screenplay by Ryan Condon and Evan Spiliotopoulos.
Nice.
I
liked it.
Okay, all right.
Go with it.
I think I got it.
It felt good.
All right. This particular story is based on Radical Studios' graphic novel Hercules, The Thracian Wars by Steve Moore. And of course, it stars Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson as our titular Hercules. And to help us wrestle with this adaptation is the lovely Amy Pistone, who's Associate Professor of Classical Civilizations at Gonzaga University. She's also a member of the Women's Classical Caucus, co-chair of the Classics and Social Justice Group. Welcome back to the podcast, Amy.
Yay! Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be here. This is the movie I will die on the hill of it being like just an amazing, perfect movie. And that no one ever, when I'm like, I want to talk about Rockules, and everyone's like, oh, because it's bad. I'm like, no, because it's perfect.
So I take it that you very much dig this movie.
I dig this movie so hard.
Yeah. Can you tell us your history with it? Like, how?
Yeah. Okay. I think it was, that's actually I think it was in grad school. There was a guy in my program roughly the same time I was, who like was really modeling a lot of his life on Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, like diet, workout routine, things like that, as one does. And like, he was all in, like he cosplayed opening night, like went, and I imagine that's probably when I first saw it. I'm actually not positive about that, but I would imagine that's probably when I first saw it. But I assign this movie when I teach Greek mythology. It's sometimes pair it with Disney's Hercules, but like if we can only do one, we're doing this one. So yeah, I just really, really like this movie a lot.
Yay! Christy, I want to hear from you because I'm so curious.
Okay. So I'm in grad school. I am highly aware that this movie is happening, and I'm excited because I think Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is perfect casting for Hercules, like so much. Like if I had to pick someone at that time, that is who I would have picked. And so I'm super hyped. But because I'm a grad student, I'm kind of poor and don't get to see it in theaters right away. And some guy explained to me what the movie was about. And his explanation was disappointing, very disappointing. And I had already previously paid a ticket to see Immortals in theater. And I was afraid of a repeat. And so I, for nearly 10 years, did not watch this movie. And
so when did you first see it?
Yes,
last
like
night. Just for this. And you know what?
God.
That guy did me dirty because it was so good. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, yes, vindication.
Yeah. I'm so sad. It took over like 9 years to finally see it.
Yeah.
I can't believe you got like mansplained out of a joyful experience, like 10 years of having this joy in your life because some dude was like, let me tell you some thoughts I got about this movie.
Yeah, I'm sad. We even have a rock at the site of Gange Vecchio that Elijah and I have dug at. We named it Dwayne because it is the rock.
That's true. Yeah. That is true.
so like, I'm so sad for me.
But on the plus side, like what a delightful, like I just assumed that this was going to be a thing that like, oh, we've all like seen this movie and we're revisiting it. But like you got to have this magical moment.
I did.
Just yesterday. That's beautiful.
What a great way to spend a Tuesday night, right? Like,
absolutely. Yeah.
And I will say, like, part of it, like, what I really enjoyed, I think, because my other concern was at the time, you know, the 2010s is like, you know, 300 come out not too long ago. Like, everyone's trying to be really gritty and really violent, which isn't my jam. And so like I think I feared that's a little bit what this was going to be.
Sure.
But instead I found it was a lot like it reminded me of Dungeons and Dragons, like the one that came out
Oh
recently.
yeah.
And I'm like, this is so delightful.
Like
Well,
it's
because
silly.
they have a rogue, they have a barbarian, like they have a bard. It's like it is a D&D campaign.
I wanted to for so long. Also, I think like part of it might have been the other Hercules movie came out, like the Legend of Hercules
Yeah.
with the guy
Yeah.
from Twilight, which
Yep.
I think was bad. I haven't seen that one either.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one. But it feels like, you know, that thing where like two movie, like Ants and A Bug's Life, like those movies come out at the same time. Like it was really like that phenomenon. And yeah, I haven't seen that one. And it's going to be compared, like it came out at the same time. I'm going to have to compare it to this movie. And I just feel like I'm setting any movie up for failure that I'm going to compare to the purest cinematographical masterpiece of our era.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think they actually call out the other movie too. I rewatched it earlier today because I was like, why wouldn't I? Why wouldn't I rewatch this? Because it was so much fun. And I guess I also kind of dig this movie for
You said
however
yes on the
campy
poll. You said love it. And I'm like,
and
all right.
wonderful. I do really kind of enjoy this movie. I think parts of it are kind of whatever, but I think I really love a lot of the choices that they made. But at some point, I think it's the storyteller, their bard, is like, what should we call this story? Should it be called the something something or the Legend of Hercules? And they're like, nah, that sounds boring. And I was like, did they just call out the other movie?
I fully missed
I
that
never
because I was
noticed
so
that
like
before.
clueless about what that one was even called. But that's amazing.
Yeah.
I love a
Yeah,
little
so
like
funny.
intertextual shade.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, when did you see it first? Did you see it when it came out?
It must have been close to the time it came out because I saw it in grad school, but it was like, I think we like ordered it, we like rented it from Amazon or something. So it wasn't in the theaters.
Because we were friends then. Why did you not correct this? Like,
I was living in Texas. I was in Austin. I think I watched it with like a few grad students, and I was like, "What is this?" I was like, "This is not what I thought this was." I think in my head, I had also like seen the trailer or like the images that they use on the movie poster, and it does look like it's leaning into that kind of darker, grittier. Like he's like turned away, and it's like all dramatic. But I feel like it gets so campy and fun that it's like, no, this is not dark and gritty.
Yeah, like it's silly. Like it's a silly, which is I think part of why it's like it's campy, and I think it also like kind of bait and switched people. Like I think people went into the movie thinking like like maybe it was gonna be like gritty or whatever, but also that like it was gonna involve the labors, and like all of the labors are just like a quick like the story, like their bard talking about, and like but I think like if I recall correctly, that was a lot of the trailer was like, oh, he's like fighting the Hydra or whatever, and so like it really felt like it was gonna be the legendary journeys of Hercules fighting monsters and whatever, and like it was none of that. Which
it was none of that.
No. I don't want to jump the gun on this, but I at some point would like to pivot into why I love that they made that choice to not do this. But I don't want to, Elijah, I don't want to cut you off on talking about your first viewing. I'm just so excited to talk about this movie.
I think I was just so pleasantly surprised. I think that like I was baited and switched because I think I didn't see it in theaters because I was like, oh God, another like Hercules, and it looks, gritty and weird and blah. And so I was taken so aback by the actual plot that it was just like delightful. I was just like, wait, he's like a con man and has a crew of mercenaries? Brilliant. I feel it's one of like the better retellings or just variations on this story that I think just exist, period. And so
all it needs is a heist, and Elijah would have been like, this is the best movie
like,
ever.
That's so true.
Okay, can I say, when I teach like Greek myth or things that have to do with mythology, like I regularly talk about like Jason and the Argonauts as like a getting a team together. Like that's a team heist, right? As compared to like your solo heroes that are more like a John Wick, right? Like it's like the one dude who's doing all the stuff. And like Hercules usually is a John Wick, right? Like he's usually a guy who does it all by himself. And so like, I don't know, like, is it true to the spirit of her, whatever, but like when I teach the like team getting the gang together, like I usually use one of the scenes from Fast and the Furious when they're like assembling the crew as like a quintessential, like,
oh yeah,
the first book of Jason and the Argonauts, like the Argonautica, is like really super hard for students to read because it's like but like I was like, really what you need to get is we're panning, we're looking at all the different guys and like, oh man, here's our safecracker, here's our whatever, here's a getaway driver, and like that's what we need. And I feel like this feels very similar to me, not just because of the Rock crossover, but like does feel like a Fast and Furious movie in some ways of like, there's like stuff happening, but like also it's like silly and there's banter and there's, that it feels like it has the same energy of a Fast and Furious movie, which like I also love. Like I do not have classy, refined cinematic taste. Like I love a big dumb movie, and like this just checks all of those. Like, is it silly? Is it fun? Is it big and dumb? Like Pacific Rim, loved it, 10 out of 10. Yes. It's just a big dumb fun movie. I love it. And this feels like it's the same vibe to that. And like I would put all those movies in the same category of like, man, that's just fun. Like it's just really fun.
Yeah. I think it doesn't take itself too seriously, which is really important.
Which I should have realized with like The Rock, because he never does, right? Like he never puts himself in a majorly gritty movie. There's got to be a little bit of lightheartedness for him, like for him to be in it.
I feel like that, like the WWE, like the wrestling, like origin story for him, like really has stuck with like that. That's where he learned to act. Like he learned to act as a wrestler, where it's so campy, like it's so over the top and silly. Yes. Like you're doing a heel turn, and that like you can't take yourself too seriously in wrestling. And I think that really informs. I will say, I noticed when I was prepping this, I was like, 2 of the 3 things I've talked to y'all about have The Rock in them. Like, because I remember talking about the terrible Rock CGI in The Mummy. Oh. Yes. Now, like, there's a real vibe here. Well,
and to be fair, like, he would have done well in Xena Warrior Princess too. Like, he would have done real good there.
He would have been amazing.
Yeah.
Well, he would have been fantastic. King. Could you imagine?
Yeah, I'm thinking now, like, this has Scorpion King vibes for sure. Like, that also
it really does.
Oddly campy and silly.
Yeah. Like, I think you're right. Like, he doesn't do movies where he's taking himself too seriously, I don't think. Like, I can't think of any offhand where he's like the movie itself takes him too seriously.
Yeah, which I love for Hercules, because to me, learning about Hercules has always been like he's the big dumb jock who gets stuff done. Like that's just who he is of the heroes. Like Odysseus is the clever one. Maybe Oedipus is like the clever but angsty one, and then you just got Hercules. He's like, I don't want to muck stalls all day. River, problem solved.
Like the fact that he shows up in comedy, like the fact that you like there is like this comic that he's eating a lot. He's always like, oh man, I'm so hungry. Like, he's just eating and drinking. And like one of my favorite play, just because it's such a weird play, The Alcestis, where like he shows up and like how I frame it at least is like I think of it as a movie or as a play that's like he thinks he's in a comedy. Like he thinks he's like a comic character. Like he thinks he's in The Frogs, right?
Yeah.
And he shows up and he's like, oh, like let's eat and drink. And then like halfway through he's like, oh shit. Like there was a death. Like this is tragic Hercules time. Like my bad. Like he just like has to like fully adjust his genre of like, okay. No, I'll go down. I'll like I'll fix it. Like I will be tragic Hercules, even though I'm like a little bit drunk and like thought we were partying, but like, that's fine. I can shift. Like, I think that's such like, he's the only hero that like really has like both of those. Like he just like, yes, I will shift into, I will be the other type of me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think arguably that's why he's always been my favorite Greek hero. Because the other ones just seem like dumb in like you're too full of yourself, versus Hercules has never felt that way to me. It's just like, I'm just a big guy. I do big things.
I was just going to say, I like that they kind of almost address that, right? Like he says the civilization is too civilized for us. And that has always been a big Hercules thing of like, can he fit in with people? Is he just like too much of everything? And just like seeing The Rock stand next to everybody else, he just is so much bigger. He's
just too much.
Really well.
Yeah.
I don't know if either of you watch the TV show Reacher, but like there's a whole like running commentary about like how like he's just a really big guy. Like he's just so big. And the novels like are really obsessed with like he's so big. And like you might run into a problem that you think is bigger than you, but then like if you're Reacher, you're just bigger than problems. And And I feel like that. And like for the season 3, they found a guy who's even bigger than him, Alan Rich, whatever the guy. Anyway, but like they found like a bigger guy, and everyone's like, oh my God, even bigger. Did they find a bigger guy that's bigger than Reacher? Like, can he solve problems by being big anymore? And like, I feel like that is like a very Hercules kind of energy of like, he's just big. Like he's big and all, and like it doesn't fit well in society. Like it's, there's a reason that there's so much collateral damage in his story, because like, he's just a really big guy. He just does big shit, he's just a big guy who might be too big for like most cities, because like that, there is a problem when you try and put him into like a domestic life, because like that's not who he is.
Yeah, I will say that was like one of my favorite lines, and I paused it because like that's the other thing I like about looking at Hercules, but also some of the other heroes like coming home from the Trojan War and just being like, if we realistically think about these men who have gone into these military excursions for years and then come back home, and the violence they just unleash in the house upon their return. It's like, I think that was a very real problem that was being shown in the mythology. And like Heracles was kind of the poster child for that. And it's interesting because, he was too big, not even just for civilization, he was too big for humanity. So he's the one we, get a very clear apotheosis story for. And like, he truly becomes a god that you don't always get that same sense with the other Greek heroes. Is like they die, and they kind of die horribly. Not that Heracles did it, but even then he was epic about it. He's like, somebody light my pyre I just built. Why is everyone too chicken to do this? Come on.
I lived on fire. Like my partner and I were like paused to talk about this because like you're talking about the parallels between like how Odysseus comes home and like there's this violence, like he can't turn off the lying and the violence, like what helped him survive at Troy and on his way home, like he can't turn it off. And like that's sort of the tragedy of like his return, and like why I think book 24 is so important.
Yeah,
because like it becomes clear that you can't just like you develop skills to survive, and like you can't just turn them off now that you don't need them. Like, and it comes out in this like indiscriminate violence. Like he can't be a good leader, maybe because of like all of the failures along the way. Like he couldn't bring his men home, and like that trauma comes out. I don't know, like pays it forward, and like he's actually going to be a bad leader again, because like he just has this like this thing happened, and he can't process it, or he can't like move on from it or like learn from it. And instead he's going to like overcorrect in some ways. And like, okay, well, I'll protect my family then. And that means killing all of these young men of my city. Like, you're the king. That's not good. And I see Heracles as like a variation on that theme of like person who like the violence isn't like, he's not a leader, right? Like he's not really ever like, he doesn't lead a city or something. Like it's a familial violence, like how much like he kills his wife and kids. And then eventually his wife and kind of sort of his kid, I mean, I guess by extension, is involved in this story at least. But like his wife is the one that's going to kill him. And like that kind of, like, I see him, and this is like, I'm totally cribbing from Catherine Liu, who I went to grad school with, and she's somewhere doing important things now. She has a book about Heracles. But like one of the big things in her dissertation was talking about how like the cost of having a hero that like fights monsters outside is that violence is going to come home, right? Like, like, and maybe you decide as a society that's a fair trade. Like, you're making the world safe for Greeks to roam around. There's no monsters. Like maybe that's a price that you collectively decide is okay, but you at least need to reckon with that. And like, I think about kind of her, like that core argument. Like I think about that a lot with Heracles, because it's just really interesting. Like if you want someone who can defeat your biggest monsters, if you enable and you create and you give a home to, and whatever it is, like if you make a Heracles, there's going to be collateral damage, and you need to think about whether that's a price you want to pay. And like, I think, not to go like too galaxy brain with this, but like, I think there is kind of an interesting parallel. Like if we think about like, if you want to be super militarized abroad, like the militarization is going to come home. Like you're going to, like you can't have the violence is only directed outward to make, I don't know, hypothetically, like to make the USA safe, and not expect that violence to be something that you see with like domestic policing or whatever. Like it's going to be there as well. Like you can't separate those things. And maybe you think that's a trade-off that's worth making, but like, you know, and I really don't think that ancient Greeks are super capable of like thinking that the answer is no war. Like I'm not sure that they can conceive of a world without war.
Yeah.
But I do think there's a persistent sense of we need to reckon with the cost. We need to be clear-eyed about what we are, like what is happening. People come home, they're Philoctetes, they've been wounded and abandoned. They're Ajax and they're killing themselves. They are Odysseus and they come home and, you know, or Hercules, and like the violence is directed at people it shouldn't be, but like that's the cost. And if it keeps Athens safe, if it gets enough gold or whatever, but like we need to think about that. And that's, I see that coming through in like a lot of different Greek texts. And I don't know, I think that does come up in this movie, but I think it also, modern movies are so, maybe the one with the Twilight guy doesn't, I don't know, but afraid to deal with the horror of that, right? Like, oh no, he didn't do it. He's a good guy. It was all a hallucination. He's been grappling with his guilt, but he didn't do it. But like, grapple with the fact that this kind of, like, that's what a hero is in the Greek sense. And our vision of a Superman who doesn't do that is maybe like too Pollyanna.
Yeah,
sure.
Well, and it felt towards the end too, it's like there felt like a very weird pivot of like all of a sudden the goal was like to unite all of Thrace, but Thrace is its people, and now we fight for the people. And I'm like, what happened? Huh?
Yeah.
This got very, very patriotic all of a sudden, and I don't know how or why.
Well, I like that the bad guy was like not actually bad, and then like the other guy was actually bad. I don't know. I like that switch up. It's like none of it was black and white. There were all of these shades of gray, and I think that really works with Hercules and with this idea of violence going back and forth. Because that, you know, the King Codus, he poisoned his own, or no, his daughter's husband so he could be king, right?
Yeah,
son-in-law. Willing to kill his grandson at some point, and it's just like a really nasty, like, dude. But like he's turning all of that violence again back to his own like want for power or something. And the guy that was originally like, you know, framed as some sort of conqueror is like actually caring about the people and like wants to save others. And so I do like that they didn't just go with a straightforward bad guy, good guy, that they have these kind of crossovers and like everybody is human, even though a lot of red shirts die.
Oh yeah.
So many.
I'm gonna say, like, not to minimize that, but like it does have kind of a like Star Wars prequels, like from my perspective, the Jedi are the bad guys.
Yeah.
Like, no. Like I do like that, you know, I don't want to dismiss your like very good point, but also like I'm gonna do a little prequel meme real quick.
There was something that also, it seems a little ahead of its time for the movie, but like the whole idea is like, my dad's gonna die. He's old. And like you get that sense with the general Citacles as well. It's like, these are some old guys and we just got to put up with them for a little bit longer. But like, what kind of damage can they do in the short time they are in power? And like, I was like, and now I'm sitting here, 2023, being like, God damn it.
It's 2024, Christy.
No. Damn it.
But it wasn't that much less applicable 10 years ago. Like, you know,
so true.
The very old leaders were 10 years less old, but it was still a rule by disproportionately overrepresented among our rulers are people who like maybe aren't going to be around to deal with all of the consequences of the decisions they're making.
Correct.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man. So when you guys rewatched this, in the openings, I loved the opening altogether, where they're like, you get the background of the stories.
Oh, I was going to say, before we get to the cool things about the opening, my number one beef with this movie, and like, again, it's a doubling down perfect movie, but my number one least perfect thing about it why are you putting it in 358 in Macedon?
Yeah.
Why?
What? I was like,
why are you doing that?
So specific.
Yeah. It was very specific.
Like, it's so specific. And like, okay, so like Alexander-ish, like Thrace is starting to rise. Like we're coming up in Philip of Macedon. Like
Philip of Macedon
why?
is expanding at that time. Yeah.
Like, and like, it's the weirdest time to set of like, oh, like, yes, Thrace, like Jason, or I don't know, I mean, my Greek, that time period, my who's in charge of who, but like Jason, I think, is a king in Thessaly who's starting to consolidate power. Like, why then? Just don't put a date. Just make it like myth time. Like the choice to put it in like a very specific time and place is like a wildly stupid decision to my mind. Like I don't understand it and I hate it. Everything else about the opening I love, but that I just wanted to jump in to be like,
I will
kills me.
On that. Yeah, I will expand on that because that I was like, that is oddly specific and an odd choice. But the other thing I notice is the Lernian Hydra. I'm watching the scene. He's slowly moving through the swamp, and all of a sudden he's grabbed from underneath under the water and then starts wrestling this water monster. Did you guys see The Witcher? The Witcher.
I think we both were like,
I'm watching The Witcher. What did you do?
It does really gets framed like that too, isn't it? Because it's like, oh, that's funny.
And he walked in and he's like, "What are you watching? Are you watching The Witcher again?" I'm like, "No, I'm not." That's The Rock right there. So that, and then that really odd date, which makes me wonder if it goes back to the graphic novel in some way. Of like, this might be a series of Hercules adaptations, and it like the full name was like the Thracian Wars.
Yeah.
So like that might have been the choice. So maybe who is it called? Steve Moore was exploring like historical moments, but what if Hercules was there? That's what I'm putting forward as a possibility, because there's a lot of interesting things about the setting, right? Like he is tied specifically to Athens, but like in the movie, but like really he's a Peloponnesian hero. He's and a lot of these stories would have been Bronze Age, would have really been tied to the Mycenaean cultures and the Mycenaean centers of power. I remember learning, like, as an undergrad student, like someone pointed out, like the first half of the labors all take place in the Peloponnese and the second half broaden out beyond that, and which is kind of really cool to think about. And so like the choice to like, they start in Macedonia, which I think is that date tied to Philip of like, let's reimagine like this is happening, but Hercules is alive. What will he do about it? And then, but he like supposedly was married and had a life in Athens, but now he's like dealing with some stuff in Thrace.
I just still don't think it's necessary. Like, even if it was in the comics or in the novel, like fine if they go off and explore and actually use the like historicization of it, but this didn't, right? Like this is not trying to connect it to anything big, so just leave it off. I think the same thing happened in Immortals, right? Don't they like they give a weird date and I'm like, just have it be
they at least have it on Crete, so that helps a little bit, but like
I just it's just not necessary. It's not adding anything.
And it reads as so, like you said, like it looks like that. Everyone's just like, oh yeah, like Greek myth times. Like it's fine. No one needs a date. And like a date, like a 300s date is like weird anyway. But like, if it's part of a broader series, like for the graphic novel, fine. But like you were adapting it. You could make the adaptation choice to cut the year and just set it in myth time. Like that would have been great.
Beautiful.
Once upon a time in ancient Greece. Okay, we're in ancient mythological time. Great. Whatever that is.
People are willing to put up with whatever. Like, okay, like, any of these, like, we're fine to just suspend disbelief. Like, I shout out last time I got to talk to y'all, with Xena, like Merlin and Julius Caesar and Helen of Troy are all alive. And like, she's going, I mean, it's fine. It's fine. It takes like a week or something for her to walk to China to go have like, it's no one cares. Like, we can suspend an incredible amount of, and like Greek myth doesn't freaking care about timelines. Like, just let it go.
No, not at all.
Yeah, the blood of Zeus, they're really good about that, but there's a really fun call out. They go to the Keramakos by the Diplon Gate. And they don't name Athens specifically, and that series doesn't have a date at all. But it's like, but it works. And for us who are like really big archaeology nerds or whatever, we're like, I know where that is. That's cool. Yeah, they're great Easter eggs, and like when you set a date, because now I'm starting to look at the environment. So I was kind of excited for where they're set up in Thrace, because those darker non-white colors, it's like they almost give off like an appearance of maybe they're wooden, they're Doric. I was like, okay, they're using Doric, so like they're kind of giving the idea of maybe archaic, or it's not Bronze Age, but it's like, but it's older. I'm like, okay, they're kind of doing well with that. And then we go to Athens, and I feel like I got flashbanged because it's so white, and I'm like, oh my god, what's happening?
Yeah. No.
There's so much marble everywhere.
It is what, like, I just want to point out, like, when archaeologists watch movies and when like literary people watch movies, like none of that occurred to me at all. It was just like, I don't know, Colin, like this is all cool and settings and stuff. Like, it just isn't a thing that I like noticed at all, of like to think about the like, what style would we say the columns are and what are they made like that. Which like I love. I'm just like really struck by how differently when I talk to ancient philosophy people, and like, we can read the same text, but like we're getting really different things
different things out of it. Yeah.
Really, like, we will read Plato, and I'm like, ooh, a story with a narrative and characterization, and they're like, let's distill it down to an argument, and like, this feels like a version of that where you guys are like, look at all the things that like I did not know it. Like, I couldn't tell you the first thing about like the clothing they were wearing. Was it the right metal for the time period for things?
I was gonna
like,
say that like General Siticles looks like he got a costume from the movie Troy. Like some of those,
I bet he did. I bet they are reusing a lot of those armor and things. 100% that, and there was something else that I saw that I was like, I bet that came from that movie. Oh, I can't remember it now. But no, I'm sure they're in a bunch of...
Well, and the other thing with Athens, I'm like, people are wearing togas, and like...
Well, yeah, there's that.
There's that. And then like, but my favorite part is like, they're in something that feels like a Senate sort of situation, right? And they're like, come say hello to all your fans, Hercules. And he goes into a theater that was like slightly reminiscent of the one that's on the Acropolis, I think. But I'm just like, whoa.
What?
How this works. I mean, I feel like The Rock wrote that in for himself. I was like, I need a moment of adulation.
Do you guys smell what Hercules is cooking?
I think it almost works for me though. Like the absolute, like, just jam pack all of the images that are classical and ancient. For some reason, they've just like put enough of them together that it just kind of reads as ancient Greece. And so I don't like super mind just like the really weird jumps in armor.
Yeah, no, it didn't bother me that much.
I was like,
okay, let me is that not akin to how Homer preserves a variety of different technologies and fighting and this and that, like we get, so isn't that really Homeric in its nature? And I assume that's why it works for you, because you're like understanding that they're going for this deep Homeric thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Again, it's like, please just get rid of the date. You can keep the locations, you can keep everything. Just get rid of the
all of these problems go out the window if you don't say that it's 358 in Macedon.
Right. It's just like, where's Philip? Where's baby Alexander? I must know what is going on.
No.
Oh,
no.
Dear.
Okay, but the beginning, other than the date, is a great sequence.
It is.
I love the just like absolute theatricality of it all, that they just pull this giant con to kill these pirates. Spectacular. Perfect. No notes.
And like the use, so like the real reason that like I first started obsessing about this movie and like assigning it to students and making everybody watch it is that I think it does a really nice job of encapsulating the later like shifts towards rationalization of Greek mythology, where people are like, okay, like these stories mean something to us, and they must be like true on some level, like they have some effect in the world around us, and like that matters. But also, like, we don't think that our gods are like oversized humans running around on a mountain. Like that feels not right. And so like, and so I think like it really, to me, it really does a nice job of like, okay, so, you know, like wasn't a Hydra, but like you know, and like kind of that shift towards talking about like, where do these things come from and what is really being preserved in these stories, which is still like a sort of, I mean, when you talk about like origins of mythology and fairy tales and stuff, it's not that different from this kind of like, you know, I mean, sure, it wasn't really like maybe it was just a fairly large dog. That was what that was like. But like, I think it does such a nice job of like really encapsulating that. Plus the like, I just like wrote down as well, like the, or so they say line, like I think is just such like, I love how much this like kind of centers the role of poets, which like the longer I teach ancient Greek literature, the more like I'm slowly honing in on the idea that like every work of literature is actually about like the poet. Like it's all poetry is about the poet. And there's a reason that like, you know, bards are like really important, you know, when you see like Demodocus and Homer, like, oh, weird. Is there a blind bard who's like really super cool? What a weird coincidence. Like everyone's kind of writing self-insert fanfic on some level. And, you know, like, and so the idea that like, none of this shit matters if no one is telling your story afterwards. Like our suffering, our accomplishments, none of it ever matters if no one talks about it. Like you can't have chaos if people aren't talking about it. And who makes you talk about it? It's poets. And so like, I think the idea that like the bard is like, has kind of a good, like kind of a significant role. Like he's talking a lot, and like the way that he spins the stories, that is a huge part of creating, like creating the myth, creating the story is the person who tells the story. I think is like a very, I love that about this.
Yeah. And there's a recognition on the part of like everyone on the team of like, that is important. Like it is to their advantage for the stories to be told a certain way and to be believed. And like, I like that there's certain parts too of like, Atalanta is part of the team. She's not from the Peloponnesus, like she should be. She instead is now an Amazonian, she's a Scythian woman, which is the inspiration for the Amazons. And so, like, the story of going and getting the girdle of Hippolyta. Oh, it's been a while. Yeah.
Yes.
Like, well, that they actually went there. So, and you know, Iolaus, how do you say his name?
Yeah, they were pronouncing it weird, not the way that I usually pronounce it. So they were, I'm trying to remember how they pronounce it. It's Iolaus or something.
Iolaus.
I said like Iolaus
or something. Yeah, it was something like that.
Yeah.
And also I loved his tagline for that, which was, what was it? It was buxom naked women and bondage. And then it got repeated with the little kid, and the Rock just looks like, you know what that means? And he's like, no.
Look, he knows what sells.
Yeah. And like, and that was just it. It's like, we don't know the demon Geryon or anything, but like, you know, that was probably part of one of their adventures, and you get to kind of like think about like how much of it is true. And they kind of showed that with Cerberus, right? Like that was one of his final labors, and like the unfinished labor, and he's visualizing it how we think about it in mythology and like, you know, representations in Greek art and everything. But then it becomes revealed to be 3 wolves at the end. And like, but that's still, if you thought about it, fighting off 3 wolves by yourself is still pretty terrifying. And like, you know, just how much exaggeration has to go into some of these stories, and how much is like, there's a really good book called The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. Yeah. That's kind of the same idea of like, it's just this guy living his life, and he ends up doing some cool things, but it gets so exaggerated by the people who are telling these stories or spreading the rumors about what happened, that he becomes kind of a living legend as a result. And I think that's a really cool exploration of characters like that.
Yeah.
Well, and I do think there's something really cool about how like on different, I've watched this a lot at this point because I keep assigning it to students. But like, I think there's something really interesting about, I used to not like the ending because I'm like, the whole point was he's just a dude. And like, now he can do supernatural things. Like, I don't know. It feels like a weird cop out, but I think like I'm sort of coming around to, I actually think I kind of like the ending in terms of like, it really kind of blurs the line between like, what does it mean to be like, you're a guy who can do cool stuff. And,
yeah,
you know, at some point, like if you start to believe your own myth, like, like maybe that is how, like, you know, that sort of snowballs in a sense of like, once people start to tell you that you are really impressive and you're really good at things and you're, you know, I don't know, savior of the Republic or like whatever, once people start talking about like your legend and your stories and stuff, like you, maybe you grow into that role, even if that wasn't who you were, right? That like, are you a hero or are you a mercenary? Like everyone thinks you're a hero. You could be that, or you could take the money and run. Like those are, you can figure out which one you want to be. And I think there is like a kind of, I really liked the way that there is kind of like, it blurs the lines of like, what are stories capable of? Like maybe something really big, like can fuel that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think like where I'm on board is when he's breaks the shackles to save Eugenia.
Yep.
Because like that was a moment where he's kind of reliving one of the worst moments of his life, and he's trying to change that moment by saving her. Like he couldn't save his wife and children. So like that him solo doing, I buy into like a lot. Yeah. I feel like a slightly better ending would have been if his whole team helped him push the Hera thing down.
I agree.
Like the true, you know, and like that's what the movie was really about. It's like Hercules is who he is because of this family he's created around him. And like that's true of the myth too. Like not every labor he completed on his own. He got in trouble for that, right? Because like technically he didn't do the Hydra.
Yeah, some people like don't. Apollodorus, I think, is like it doesn't really count because you had help.
Yeah. And so that idea exists, right? It's like that Heracles does, and you know he went with Jason and the Argonauts at some point. He is a team player in mythology, that in the way that like not many other heroes are. So like I think that would have been a slightly better ending. It's like, yeah, let him break out of his shackles, because that was like a really intense moment that I could see that he is kind of overcoming an adrenaline rush. But like when it comes to knocking down the statue, make that a team effort, because this whole thing's been a team effort.
I like that.
Yeah, I think I like that.
Yeah.
Because like he is, when you say he's like a team player in a way that other heroes aren't, like that really, because I think about like in the Argonautica, he, like everyone just assumes he's going to be the leader. And like a lot of our heroes would do that. Like I feel like Achilles or Odysseus, or like a lot of our heroes would be like, oh yeah, it's my quest now. And like, it's not his quest. Like it's Jason's quest. And like, Jason needs to figure out how to become a leader in some way. And so like the fact that Heracles like doesn't, I mean, I think my favorite Heracles moment in ancient sources is at the end of Heracles Furens, when like he picks up Theseus, or when Theseus comes to pick him up, and they have this like really intense like bro moment of, he's like, don't touch me, like I'm polluted, I have miasma all over me, like don't touch me. And Theseus is like, you know, we're gonna figure it out, bud. This really kind of touching moment of these like two very like close friends who are willing to, like, Theseus is willing to deal with the risks of like ritual pollution to help him out. And like, I just think that you don't see like Achilles and Patroclus, whatever we think that relationship is, like lovers or very like intimate male friends or whatever, but like you don't see that many friends who are, they're not related. It's not a family thing. It's friends who are truly like really like ride or die friends. And I feel like Heracles is one of those people that we do kind of see that with. And so like when you say that, I'm like, oh yeah, he is in some ways, it almost feels like less insecure about like glory and honor. And maybe because he has so much, like that he doesn't need to worry about that, but like that he's a little less worried about like, I can't let this guy look better than me. Like, no, I can help out. I can be like, I can let Jason be in charge here. Like he's going to screw it up, but he needs to learn. Little guy needs to be in charge of something. And like, I think that is a really, I don't know, just like a really nice side. Like I like that, seeing that side of Hercules.
Yeah, and in this movie, I think he like very much recognizes like what the other team members bring to the gang, right? Like he's like, yeah, couldn't do it without you. You know, he's very much aware of his own limitations and whether or not, you know, he's trying to broadcast them. I remember he's like, you can't see that you're wounded. You can't bleed like a normal person. But like he can bleed and he probably could die. And so, yeah, I think the importance of his team does seem to really, really show in his actions and the way that he treats them like really, really close friends. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we see that with Articulus too, when he decides to leave at the end. And he's like, there's no hard feelings. You have been with me this whole time. You deserve to live like a king, like you've always wanted to, because you've always been there for me. And like, this is me. This is my thing that I need to deal with. And yeah.
I thought that was such a, like, because you could see that like everyone giving him shit and like, how dare you like not hang out and like help us out with this thing. But like the choice to say like, yeah, none of you signed up for this. Like you stick around if you want, but like legit no hard feelings if you don't. And, you know, I mean, he's ready to let Autolycus go. And I don't know. I think that's like, I really liked that scene that it's like, I mean, Autolycus is going to come back. He's got to come back, but it was, I don't know. I thought that was a really nice scene. And like how much when, who's he there? Eugenia or whatever. Rebecca Ferguson is talking to them. He's like, she's like, tell me a story about a guy that killed his kids.
Yep.
His wife and his kids. And when Adeliana's like, none of us have to be like, we choose to fight for him. And like, we all like, he saved all of us. Like that's what this is. Like, this is a found family and we follow him because he would die for us and we would die. Like that's what this is. And I think that's just a really kind of beautiful and like not, I don't know if I'd say like true to Greek mythology, like, I don't know, whatever. But like, I think it's a really beautiful way to make this a story about like, this like, I mean, it is really, it is very much a D&D adventure.
It is.
It really is. Also, I would say Greek mythology is all about the found family. How many infants got exposed on a mountain and were saved by a shepherd? How many were
literally
nursed
found
by
family
a bear or a wolf?
I don't think we use found family pejoratively that much. This is found family as in, oh God, it's going to cause your downfall one day.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. I do wish that Atalanta had gotten like a full shirt and not like
Armor.
A half shirt.
Yeah, the kind that like leaves your most vulnerable inner organs.
Right?
Yeah.
Open. I mean, to be fair, I think I said this when Colin and I talked about this. Like, to be fair, The Rock is also showing a lot of skin. But it's The Rock. Like, I kind of expected. I'm like, can the like Scythian warrior actually wear armor? That'd be great.
Yeah.
I like that she's an archer, but can she also just be like a really good horse rider and falconry?
Yeah, she needs to be on a horse.
Like, get full Scythian with her if you're gonna do that, because that's really cool. So
missed opportunity.
Yeah. I liked her. Like, I liked the scene when Sidicles hits on her. And she shows she's more than capable of taking care of herself. And The Rock just like checks in and is like, you good? She's like, I took care of it. But like, you know, it not being like, I need to protect her, but just be like, I'm just making sure you're okay. And if you need me, you know I'm here for you. And I'm like, you know what? That was lovely. I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Hercules is a true ally, you know? That's what I've always said about him.
Just don't marry him.
Yeah, just don't marry.
He's like an ally in the abstract kind of sense. Not someone you want to be too close to.
Oh gosh. So we should talk a little bit about some of the other characters because they were really fun. I kind of love King turned Prophet and Fiaris of Arg.
I love Ian McShane so much. Like, I love him so much. I will watch anything he's in. I love him. And you don't get a lot of prophets that are funny. Like that's just not like a trope. He was great. Like I don't know if you guys watched Deadwood, but like I've loved he was so good in Deadwood. And
so good.
It just like the ending note being like, you know, like whatever, you can be a hero or something, but like, what do I know? I'm supposed to be dead. Yeah. I just like the moment when he's waiting for the spear that's going to hit him, he's like, oh, my time. It's like, that was my time.
That was my fate. That was my fate.
Excuse me. That was my fate.
I loved him.
It's like, I will die by a flaming spear. That's pretty cool. And you're like, you know, you're not wrong.
No, you're not wrong. No, everything that he said was excellent. I love his attitude and the elsewhere-ness, the Deadwood, just like kind of latent like violence, I guess, because he was like a badass, absolutely. But just like the attitude, it was so perfect. And he's like, did we die in this battle? And he's like, it's not my time. I don't know about you.
I know I'm not dying today though. I kind of love so like full disclosure, I just started listening to the audiobook of Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology, which then got me thinking about American Gods, also by Neil. And like,
yes.
Ian McShane plays Mr. Wednesday, who's Odin, and like I think that's like also kind of a fun because like the Norse mythology book was talking about like, you know, the stuff Odin does to get foresight and stuff. I was like, ooh, that's like a fun casting intertext of like, oh, okay, that's Odin, prophet. Yeah, I like this.
So fun.
I also like that they give him some like shaman elements too. It's like, because I think that Autolycus makes a joke of like, hey, you want to share some of whatever you're smoking? Because that is a little bit of it for sure.
So
well, like I have a huge chip on my shoulder about everyone like wants to discard the Pythia, like, oh, she must have been high as shit, like fumes or whatever, like or something. She's high because like a woman couldn't compose, you know,
right,
dactyl hexameters and couldn't whatever and all this stuff, and which like really pisses me off when I'm like, no, like we only do that when it's women telling, like it's Cassandra and the Pythia, we cannot believe because they're crazy women, and like we never do that with male prophets. Like no one says Tiresias, like what are you smoking? Like it's always like, oh, Tiresias, you've been bribed. Like we're still not going to believe our prophets, but we're going to like, men get to not be believed because like, oh, they're scheming, they're too clever, and they're doing a thing, and like women, it's always because you're crazy. And I do enjoy that, like they're doing this with a male prophet figure because it's always like, oh, the Pythia must have been high, and like, or not that. Like the idea that a woman couldn't compose hexameter just annoys me so much. Like, yes, she could. Stop it.
Of course she could.
Yeah.
And like his whole thing wasn't like, it wasn't that all the time either, right? He's just like, hey, we completed a good mission. Yeah. We're all relaxing, enjoying the success. I'm gonna chill out, guys. Gonna see my death, but hey,
it's true.
Yeah. A little something to take the edge off.
That's what the gods want. Yeah, exactly.
That's good.
Hey, he's seen some rough times, I bet. So
that's true.
Seeing the future can't be a good thing. Like that can't be an enjoyable life.
There was this great Jake Long, and it was a Disney show, and it had this premise that there was these twin sisters, and one could foresee all good things and one could foresee all bad things. So the sister who could see all good things that would happen in the future, she's like super gothic. And then the one who could see all the bad things, she's like super like bright and like and everything. And I'm like, I kind of loved that characterization of just like when all you see is good all the time, you gotta make it a little dark in your life.
You gotta even it out a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know why I thought of that, but it's like that was an interesting depiction of seers and like how to imagine them, especially female seers again. Yeah.
I really liked our little animal warrior Titius. I thought he was a really like, again, a character with some like comedic just energy. And
Yeah, like when he goes jumping at the shield wall, like,
oh my gosh, I love that. I love it so
like
much.
when the shield wall holds and he gets, he's like, yeah.
All right.
I love that. I love that.
And then, but they still gave him like a serious note too.
He was so dark too.
Yeah. When Hercules has been wounded and he takes the medicine to help him sleep, and then he has the vision of Cerberus, and he just, night or sleepwalking.
Yeah, I think he was probably
Sleepwalking
yeah.
and kind of
hallucination.
terror.
Yeah, and Titius is the one who kind of like comforts him and is like, I understand. And it's so good. It's like they give such light moments for each character, and they give such, serious notes to them that like,
yeah.
Well, and I really liked the ending. Like it's like, it's sad that he died, but
yeah.
I do think like he died to prevent another child having war trauma happening to another child. Like I think was a really nice, like it sucks that he dies and he's the only one that has to die out of the whole gang, but like giving him that kind of flow of like, I'm going to make sure that this doesn't happen to someone else was kind of a nice ending.
For sure.
Yeah.
And he's so protective after he like accidentally scares the child earlier, right? And I think he could like really see like he didn't want that. He didn't want to be scary. And I also really liked that, he got to, even though he died, I like that he got to be like the kind of the big hero of that moment. So, right. Who haven't we hit on?
I'm just like looking down the list of people. I was like, as I was looking up things, I was like, oh, that's Voldemort's brother when we hit King Eurystheus. I was like, oh, of course he's a bad dude because you're related to Voldemort. That makes sense.
And he was great. He was so good.
Yeah, he was. Well, especially like after giving this whole like just villain monologue about like, people were going to love you more than me and I had to do it and and like to try and back out it. Like, no, but like, it wasn't, you're a mercenary. You could like, but you got to know that's not going to work.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. At this point, you're beyond dead. You're deader than anyone has ever been before.
Dead.
Yeah. I realized that actor is also the guy who plays Fred from Red Robes, White Hood Hat.
Handmaid's Tale.
Handmaid's Tale.
Oh, yeah. I haven't seen Handmaid's Tale.
Okay.
Well, he's very creepy and really awful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was two things I feel like I was slightly sad not to see. One with Eurystheus was like, I really wanted him to go hide in a giant amphora just for a callback to like,
that'd be
like,
so good.
That would have worked out really well, and just have Hercules like literally yank him out of it. Like,
so good.
I wanted that. And then I don't know that The Rock would sign up for this, but I also thought it would have been really fun, like if they had to sneak into a camp to get intel or something, if he would have cross-dressed. Because like
that would have been really fun.
That would have been a great Easter egg for Hercules again. Because again, it's like, this is a man so confident that he spent a year dressed as a woman, and he probably enjoyed it.
Like that. Probably enjoyed it.
Had a great time. He's like, I don't have to slay monsters. I just got to dress up like a woman for a while.
Yeah, you're just doing chores for a woman. Yeah. That dressed as a like that. How is that a bad way to spend? Like, you're not cleaning out stables. Yeah. Like that has got to be the most restful year of his entire life.
Right. So good.
But knowing what I've heard about The Rock and how like in certain like things, it's like you can only be hit so many times and you can't lose or anything like that. It's like, I think he would have drawn the line at cross-dressing, but it would have been a great Easter egg had they done it. So like those were like the two. It was like,
well, and especially if you like could manage to like, I feel like, I don't know, 20 years ago, like the height of comedy was like, could you imagine a man wearing a dress? Like it was just this like real icky kind of comedy of like, oh, a man in a dress, hilarious. And like, I think The Rock would not be down for maybe like a respectful, like like, hey, I'm dressing as a woman because like the situation demands it, and not as like, it's the punchline of like, could you imagine anything funnier and weirder than this?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
That's fair too. That's why when we were like, he doesn't do movies where like, take himself too seriously. Like, yeah, to a point. But in some ways, he takes himself way too seriously when like him and Vin Diesel and the entire Fast and Furious group is like, none of us can ever lose a fight, ever. because then no one will take us seriously as men if we ever get punched on screen. Like, okay, guys, you're being very un-Hercules right now.
Yeah.
He was also like greased up this entire movie. He always like glowed. I mean, like, can't somebody just come by between takes and it's just greasing up the rock?
Just re-grease him.
Yes.
Yeah, just brush up the grease real quick.
Yeah.
You're playing a son of Zeus, maybe, or not. Like, you gotta be a little glowy.
You do.
Yeah.
It's true.
I kind of like new headcanon that like Aeolus is very much like out there doing it like when no one's looking, he's just like greasing them up for the story. You gotta sell the story. He just do a quick his own little like, you know, thing of olive oil that he's just carrying around with him for immediate touch-ups.
Yeah,
you gotta
like makeup bag. Just like
Oh man.
I have one more casting. Well, I have 1.5 more casting related things I did want to mention. Just if I don't want us to get off casting before I can mention. This isn't even casting. This is just characterization in general. But Atalanta, I do also really love that. Like nothing about aside from like Siddicles being kind of a douchebag. Like none of it's about like loves her as a sex object. You know, yes, she is showing off her abs all, which like, you know, if I had a 6-pack, I probably would too. Like I can't remember that much. No one's getting close enough for it to be a problem that she doesn't have full armor. Like she's actually killing everyone way before that happens. So it's kind of a flex in a way that like I don't actually have to be worried about all of my vital organs because none of you will get near them. But I kind of love that like the one token female in the group like isn't constantly sexualized in terms of like her interactions with like Antilochus is never like trying to hit on her in a weird way or like none like that just never happens.
Yeah.
There's like it feels like that was a nice I like that.
And nor is it like, oh, she's a sister to us, because it's like also weird of being like, oh, you can't not hit on a woman if she's not related to you. They did a good job of avoiding a lot of that. It does also give me sometimes like a little bit of the like the vibe of like, oh, I'm a guy's girl sort of a thing, and it's not like overly problematic in this one, but it does have a little bit of that element to it, especially when I think back to the opening scene and she's holding her hand over a flame and like, you know, she's just doing what the guys do. And she's like, and she doesn't seem disdainful of women or like, you know, there's no comment like that, but it's like, it also would have been interesting to see more interaction with Urgenia maybe as a result. But I liked really how they portrayed Urgenia too, where like her son is kind of proud of her because she's helping heal people because all the doctors have died and she's just doing what she can. And there's not a discussion of like, well, you're the queen or whatever, and that's not a role you should be stepping into. It's very much of like, I do what I have to do for the good of the community, for the good of the group, for, you know, and then like my gender doesn't necessarily have anything to do with it.
I really like that she also like The Rock likes her, but not in a way that necessarily seems like a sexual kind of like he likes her and he's concerned with her, but it doesn't seem to be like, oh, he wants to help because he's in love with like that's I feel like that's just such a trope of like, oh, I'll do the right thing because this woman like I want to sleep with her and it happens to doing good things is going to get me laid. So I'll do it. Like it's not that at all. Like he's actually like doing the right thing because like, you know, she and Rhesus and the kid, like, you know, people helped him realize what the right thing is, but it didn't take that much convincing. And she is there again, like it's not like an essentializing view of her as like, oh, she's the sexy queen. He's going to marry her and he'll be the king. Like it doesn't follow that plot line at all. And I really like that. Yeah. I will say in terms of the Atalanta thing, like as someone who very much used to be like a quote unquote cool girl type of like, you know, I hang out with the dudes and I drink whiskey and I'm not like the other girls like that. Like I have a lot of, I don't know, weird feels about like those kind of characterizations of like, oh, like I see a lot of that in Athena of someone who's like so insistent on being like, oh, I do guy stuff. I don't do girl stuff. And it comes out in misogyny as compared to coming out in like if you want to be a tomboy, be a fucking tomboy. Like no one cares. But you don't have to do that at the cost of women. Yeah. And the fact that I think Atalanta doesn't like it would have been nice to see like, you know, her having other interactions with Eugenia, or it's really the only other woman in the
that's
in the
kind
whole
of the
thing.
problem we run into with a lot of these. It's like, and there's only 2 women. All right.
That's all the women.
Well, there was a third, but she's dead, so
Yeah. So you can never actually interact with another woman.
Yeah.
But like, I do think outside the bounds of the movie, I could imagine her being kind of a mean girl. But like, also the fact that she does these things that her friends do when she spends most, like, feels, and this is possibly something like I think about a lot, because like I spend a lot of time in sports context where I'm one of the only women in the room. So I'm like, no, it's possible to hang out and do things that the dudes are doing, but not be like bad and gross and misogynist about it. But like, I liked that it didn't seem to be like her identity was predicated in terms of like not being like women. Because like the only other woman is also doing cool stuff. Like she's helping heal and she's taking risks, and like it's not like there is, and like we don't get to see enough about Megara, but like she doesn't seem to be like a like, these are the bad kind of women, but Atalanta is the good kind of woman. Like that doesn't seem to be something that I was picking up. And so like, I don't know. I think I'm cautiously on board with our Atalanta.
She's the kind of like, I grew up loving mythology because my first favorite character was Artemis, because she was, to me, a tomboy. And it's like how much of the media at my time when I was growing up showed a tomboy just living life and it's good. There wasn't a lot of that when I was growing up, and I'm glad to see that changing, because there's some of that weird, you're right, like really lean into I'm one of the guys and therefore I'm misogynistic towards other women for liking putting on makeup or something like that. It's just like, enjoy what you enjoy and embrace that. So like, that's why I've always loved mythology. It's like, I actually really enjoyed Atalanta because she was what she reminded me so much of what I loved about Artemis growing up, and just being like, she's just cool.
Yeah.
She does cool stuff that most women aren't doing, but she's a woman and she's doing it. So awesome.
Yeah. I'm realizing this now, that there isn't a romance at all. Like, I guess there's Megara, but like she's dead, but like that feels so refreshing. Like there is no like big get together kiss at the end. It's like, it's not about that at all.
It's like we don't need it or something.
It's like we don't need it. Oh my God.
That was my favorite. So the final season of Spartacus, because we had covered the Stars of Spartacus series, and I'm like, all right, Spartacus has now outlived his wife and his girlfriend. He does not need another woman in this final season. But nope, give that man a one-night stand. I'm like, we didn't need it.
No, of course not.
It's a cool female character to explore too. It's like, she does not need to sleep with Spartacus to be relevant.
True.
Doesn't she though?
She really did
it. Look, how am I supposed to care about a woman if she's not connected to a man?
Oh my gosh. How are we all feeling? Anybody have like a final question? Final thing we didn't touch on?
I feel like I don't know if we talked much more about. We talked about okay, I can't say his name now. Autoculus that much.
Atilicus.
Thank you. I feel like he's like the only one we touched on a little bit with his like decision to leave momentarily, right. But that was more about like Hercules' relationship. Look at me going to the Greek Hercules. It's like, no, this is Rockules. This is Hercules. I must remember the Roman name. Damn it. He also seemed to serve as kind of like the straight man character in a lot of ways, and I thought it was interesting too that he is supposedly the one who grew up with Hercules on the streets. They explained. I don't know the streets of where, because apparently he's from Sparta.
Great. Okay.
Again, this is the D&D. This is ancient Greek D&D right here. It really feels like.
Yep.
Because I got to the point where it's like, how do we know for sure Elias is the nephew of Heracles? I'm like, could it be his nephew through his marriage to Megara? That's all I got.
Okay.
Don't ask questions like that,
I don't care.
I think his cousin's actually important in Greek mythology, and I'm just like, but if he grew up not knowing his father and on the mean streets of Sparta all of a sudden, like,
I mean, he could also not know his father and his father still be Zeus.
But but does that mean Laius is the son of Zeus or like a son of Poseidon to make him his nephew? Like, explain.
I feel like they would have touched on that. Like, I feel like Iolaus would have said something, right?
Or made something up.
Or made something up at that point.
It's like, okay, he's Zeus,
and your dad is Zeus, and I'm your nephew.
Poseidon's a little on the shorter side. He's on the shorter side. You know, underwater, it stunts your growth. Yeah. So, Antilochus, any other thoughts on him?
I don't really. It's cool. I see Rufus Sewell and I think Knight's Tale, and that makes me happy. That's all I got on him.
I'm like, yep, you're cool. Like you.
You're cool. Yeah. If you haven't seen it, so I sent out a poll of just because we're like revisiting a lot of these old films, and like I just asked, was like, did you love it? Did you hate it? Haven't seen it? Or you're like, eh. And like people who have responded is 50% like love it or haven't seen it. So I would say if you haven't seen it and you liked Dungeons and Dragons, please watch it. This is so good. It's so enjoyable. And it's less than 2 hours. Like,
beautiful.
Yeah,
magical.
It's a nice tight runtime. I love a director who used a film editor. Like it is just God. There's not dead time, there's not dumb stuff that nobody needed. Like it's you got action, you got comedy, you got this, you got that, you got a real Fremen sort of Dune ambush where they're like the Rhesus guys are like under the ground and they're like, like it's I don't like it makes good use of the time.
It does.
It does not have like dead air and stuff. It's a tight edited actual like good under 2 hour movie.
And I watched the extended cut, which I think only added 10 minutes to it.
Yeah,
which I think was like a training sequence and maybe a little bit more to the battle. And I'm like, it's great.
Can't go wrong with an extra montage. You gotta have an extra montage.
And it was a montage. And I'm like, this is so good.
This is good. Yeah, no. Surprisingly well-made movie. Yeah. Maybe not surprising. I don't know.
I wasn't surprised. I like at the time I was like, it's gonna be great. And I was talked out of it. And now I'm glad I was talked back into it.
It was surprising if you gave too much weight to random dudes who told you their opinion. In that case, it is surprising.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, I have like a final, I guess, question. I know that Amy, you said that you like assign this to your myth students. So what are maybe some of the reactions from your students? What new wonderful thoughts have they brought up about this?
So I would say, like we've read a lot of stuff about Hercules by the time, and like, so this last time I taught, so it was, I guess 1.5 years ago now. Oof. But so we watched Disney's Hercules. So kind of the through line, because one of the big issues with like a Greek myth class is, I'm sure you both know, like there's just way too much content. Like you have to figure out some way of structuring it. And so I had like we did a peripheral stuff, but we did 2 main, Heracles and Helen were our 2 like core things we were looking at. And so for like, we read Alcestis, we read the frogs. I'm trying to remember. We'd read a handful of things about Heracles and then watched Disney's Hercules first. Just cause because I think in some, like, the number of time people are yelling like Hercules, and like, oh, that is.
Yeah.
I think they're assuming an audience that is familiar with the Disney version. And so I think one of the things for students that are not super familiar with Greek myth and like the impulse to think that there is one like right version of a story is really hard to kind of displace that idea, that assumption. And so I think comparing something that like, these are both versions that like very much heroize in a modern sense, but they do it in like very different ways, right? Like one, like he's definitely the son of Zeus and Zeus is a great dad and all of these things. And like, it's a very Disney-fied version as compared to where he's still a hero, and he's still a hero in a way that scans to us. He's not like a guy that did a lot of murder that wasn't deserved. Like, and if he killed someone, they deserved it. Yeah. So it's still a very legible heroism, but it has a very different side. And like, I think for students just kind of seeing that range of like, both of these are Hercules stories. And at some point, all the versions, like for you guys, I insist on getting very like you guys heard of what a palimpsest is? And like, talk about like the way that these characters like accrue meaning and layers and stuff. And I think seeing these two movies that are not super far apart in time, like really illuminate some of that. Like, these can both be true. There's not a right and a wrong story. These are both part of the broad universe, like the extended Hercules universe, and all of these exist in it. I think is a nice, like, plus, I mean, it's just kind of like it's a fun movie. And I think, for students that had to read a lot of tragedies, because this last time I taught it, like I'm a tragedy person, and I was like, the best version of all of these stories is in our tragedies. So we must read, we read the Trachiniae. Like, they had to read a lot of tragedies that semester. Also, like, I just, what I talked about earlier about like Hercules has like a tragic and a comic element. And I think it kind of came through in interesting ways for my students, seeing like, he can do both, like just kind of thinking about genre, which is something that I do a lot more of late. And has been like a real trend in my classes of like, let's like think about expectations of genre and like, what expectations do you have when you see this movie and you see the picture and everything? Like, do you think that all of the action is going to be just voiceovers from our storyteller? Like, is that what you thought? Like, what did you think you were getting into? And did the story live up to those expectations? And it was kind of fun to see like how students were reacting to those aspects. So yeah, I think that was an interesting aspect that came out. Cause like and to be fair, I did preface it with talking at great, like all semesters, like, guys, it's the greatest movie. Like, you guys you have no choice but to love this movie. You have to love it because it's a great movie. And, that may or may not have come through in my students' responses to it, but
sure.
it had become kind of like a running joke by the time we got there of like, this is Dr. Pistone's very favorite movie, guys.
I was going to say, it's like, just wait. Cause like, I grew up knowing him as The Rock from my brother was obsessed with wrestling. So like, that's how I knew him growing up and like Fast and Furious. But it's like, eventually you're going to get the students who are like, hey, isn't that the guy who voices Maui on Moana?
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's true.
And that's how
thinking him. About, well, and he is back in wrestling now. Like, he's doing this like prolonged heel turn move in wrestling. So like, it's really like, he's gone through a full life cycle of wrestling to acting to animated voice actor to back to wrestling.
They're all going to be like, oh, this is the Maui guy.
Yes.
And that's when we'll all feel even older than we do now.
just crumble into dust immediately.
Yep. Yeah, well, I just taught classic myth this past semester, and I'm like really sad now that I didn't even think about using this movie, because I agree. I love the idea that it could be used to like create another layer and kind of shatter the canon aspect that I agree. I think a lot of our students come in with just like, this is the story in a box, but it's like, no, actually, it's like an exploded box.
If I was able to, I couldn't get it like for my class this last semester, but last time I taught this, but Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is the movie I would really want to pair with that as like a first week of class. Let's talk about what it means for all of these can coexist. Because usually I'll be like, let's talk about all the people that have played Batman, and they're all Batman, and that's fine. And all of these are Batman stories. And like, there's elements you can't change, but there's lots of things you can change about the tone and the vibe. And like, is it campy? Is it gritty? Is it whatever? Like, but like Into the Spider-Verse does that. And I don't have to be like, do you guys remember who George Clooney is? Like, Michael Keaton, is that ringing any bells? Right. Like, being able to be like, okay. Cause like all of like the old, like the way campier ones with like, did you all know that Danny DeVito had a whole career before Always Sunny, and like he was the Penguin, like that was a thing.
He was also Philoctetes.
There you go. Yes.
Philoctetes, canonically a centaur, as we all know, or a satyr, as we all have always known. Yes,
that reminded me. I loved that little play they did as like centaurs, huh? But like they like set it up perfectly in the shot to be like, that's
it was such a good, I love how much it like encapsulates both like the making of myth and the rationalization of myth of like, you could absolutely, like, I'm sure anthropologists are like, stories of mythology definitely come from encountering like horse archers for the first time and being like, what is this thing? They're so different than how we ride horses. What are we doing?
Yeah, it's pretty commonly thought that mammoth skulls would have been the inspiration for the Cyclops because of the nasal hole in it being in the middle of the head, the skull. So like people have definitely looked at like fossils and stuff being the inspiration for these different monsters and stories. So I liked they played with that idea. I'm like, this is great.
Yeah. Can I know we've been talking for a long time. Can I tell you guys one more super quick thing that relates a lot to things that we're So I am like thing that I am working on going forward is, so you know how there's those reacting to the past like history role-playing games. So I am working this summer on trying to develop a Greek mythology based like D&D style, or not D&D exactly, but like similar type of role, like tabletop role-playing game based on Greek mythology. And so like when we're talking about like the different types of heroes, like the student I'm working with, like we've pretty well decided like Hercules has to sit this one out because he's like the balance of the game wouldn't be, but like in terms of, so like instead of a class, you put like, your class is like, are you an Achilles style? Are you like, so we're playing around with like stats and things and hoping to make like this whole like very D&D style role-playing game as something that you can use in Greek mythology classes. So thinking about like the archetypes of different types of heroes. And cause like, I think the role-playing games reacting to the past is super cool, but I don't teach history classes. Like I teach literature classes mostly. Right. And so like not having that, but especially like at a time when everyone's getting more and more like, oh, like ChatGPT, don't want to do essays. How do I want to assess students? And like being able to have like, well, you're going to design, like, we're going to sit down, we're going to read about heroes. We're going to design, like, we're going to do a character sheet. And like, I need you to tell me how you're allocating your stats based on the heroes. Like, you're going to write me a 1-page thing about what type of hero are you? Are you an Orpheus type? Like, are you a bard? Are you whatever? Like, are you a hero that plays well with others? Are you not? Like, who's your patron god or goddess? Because that's going to like play an element. You're going to have certain buffs and things. And so like, trying to do a much more like immersive and like very interactive thing is, so anyway, as we were talking about like Hercules and D&D, like I'm actually working on something like right at the intersection of that right now. And I'm really, really hoping that this will be something that works and I can be like, everyone, if you want to teach your Greek myth class with like some elements of this, we can totally like, oh no, the Cyclops attacks. What does your party do? And I'm pretty excited about this.
You could always have a child of Hercules who is like very put out that everyone like knows their dad, and they're like,
like really trying to fight the rumors of Nepo baby. Like, no, I'm not. Yeah. I'm not the hero, guys.
It's so good.
Dad could have punched that into oblivion. I'm like,
yeah.
That's exactly Dan. That's exactly what Nestor would be like. Well, I knew your father, and he could punch things way harder than that.
This sounds like so much fun. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
I am very excited. Yes. I'm hoping, I thankfully have a student who's a very experienced D&D, like has actually done a lot of like DM, GM kind of work. And so like he is helping me with getting like, we're developing like our mechanics and our stat categories and things like that. Nice. Like I have like the vision, but not the skill set to apply it. So I am very excited. I'm hoping to be able to test play it like in the fall and maybe be like a thing. So I will keep you guys keep you posted.
Please keep us updated. Yes.
Posted, and maybe like we could record a session of it because that could be fun too. Like
that would be super fun.
So fun. That would be so fun.
All right. Do you want to do the outro too, Lej?
Yeah, I can do the outro.
Go for it.
Amy Pistone, thank you so much for joining us once again. And if people want to learn more about you and your work, where can they find you?
Well, I have a website, amypistone.com. I used to be very active on Twitter, and it's a collapsing hellscape right now. So, I guess that's probably the main place right now for posting stuff. I guess maybe Twitter, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, I guess probably Twitter still. If I do anything cool, I usually post it on like, hey, I had an article come out. So I'm Amy Pistone on Twitter, and amypistone.com is my personal website. And I generally put things there if I do them.
Sweet. Awesome. Yay. We were so happy to have you come back and talk Rockules.
Yes, thank you we're revisiting some. I'm like, oh my God. Yes. I'm so excited. I could get a second crack at doing Rockules.
And special thanks to all of our listeners. We could not produce episodes like this without you. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe if you like what you hear. You can find all our episodes at movieswedig.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to know more about our upcoming plans and episode releases, be sure to follow us on social media. You can find us under some version of the handle at Dig Movies or Movies We Dig. And we'll talk to you all again soon. Ciao, ciao!